Hey everybody, we really hope this is going to help you out. This is FACT Module A, going through the process of hopefully giving you a quick and easy understanding of this. First thing I want to mention is that it is basically broken up into three particular steps, so to speak. The first step that we're looking at is really just collecting the information and reviewing it. And that's pretty much just making sure you have all the documentation that's listed here, right? The second step, however, is when we really start taking a look at what does this information need. Let's take a look at contextualizing that information and making sense of it. That's the job really of you and your support provider working together and having discussions about the information you collected. Again, in step 3, you go a little bit further in your extending, talking about your current classroom assignment and how all of this information really becomes important to make sense of, right? So again, steps 1, 2, and 3, just kind of chunking this Module A in a way that's very usable and hopefully understandable. These are the steps you'll be going through, and these are the steps we're going to be talking about today. So when we start taking a look specifically at this, you can see this is kind of written over here. The reason is what you want to take a look at in this particular piece of collecting information is to be sure that you look at your special population students, right? Make sure that you know who it is actually looking at students who might have a 504 plan for medical conditions, students who already have an IEP, correct? And really looking at those needs in your classroom. Some of this information is on Illuminate, right? And you'll see very clearly in the documents it specifically states that the information is contained in the Illuminate report. In that case, you don't have to worry about filling in that pieces of information. For special population students, however, it generally is a rule that very little bit of information can be found online, and that's for the right to privacy. So in some cases you'll notice that is a little bit more work. In that case you'll be going to a case carrier, or you'll be going to somebody else on your site who knows those students well. The other thing is these files are often kept in the office. They're usually in a confidential file, and you'll need information about how to access that information and how to make sure that that information is kept confidential. The reason this document to the right has all these little bits and pieces of information is because in creating this instructional environment piece, what we anticipate that you use is some sort of an online technological application, and we've included a little hyperlink to one for you to make it a little easier. Of course, there are many and you can use them. We'd really like for you to use technology when you're creating this classroom layout / seating chart. And part of the reason for that is that teachers are meant to be critical users of technology. So we're trying to accomplish a couple of things here. We need to demonstrate evidence that you are users of technology in ways that are more effective, right? So that being said, you'll do that, and you will definitely indicate things in your classroom that show you've clearly taken care of safety issues, such as telling us where is that fire extinguisher, show us where that is, where are the emergency exit procedures, maybe also where is that fire, the backpack a lot of you have, like an emergency backpack, right? So these are some of the things when we talk about wanting to have safety issues addressed. These are some of the safety issues we're talking about. We've updated the forms, and we're more confident that we'll have less return modules, but we recognize that sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. All right. The other thing is we anticipate a very clear rationale for the decision making. And you know, it makes sense, guys. If you've done all this work collecting student information, English learners, special population students, then we should see a connection between that information and your classroom layout. We should see that there's a reason you have students sitting where they do, and there's a relationship that needs to happen. this is really where your support providers can also help. So have conversations with them about, the English learners and how it's best to seat them. The students who have IEPs or 504 plans, this is where your support provider really can come in handy. So taking a little bit a bigger look across the board here of that, you see here in number 1 the special population profile, right? And we looked at that a little bit in the previous slide. Number 2, that's the one about English learners, right? And so you'll see that highlighted area there. There's an Illuminate report that's already created with a lot of this information. That being said, then part 3 becomes even more important, because now you're looking at parts 1 and 2 and saying, okay, let me put this all together to create this overview of all this information. Let me on one sheet have a going list of my students with special population students, right? Let me look at those who are English learners, and now let me make sense of what this means. And you'll have that on one overview for your class profile. So there's something that's called, you'll see that comes up throughout this module, which is class, school, district, and community. And I'm sorry, the other one went off the screen here. But class, school, district, community. So what we did in the first one prior to this is we really took a look at that class, didn't we? We looked at all the students in that classroom, those with special needs, those with who are English learners, and so now we're moving into this realm of the school and the district. With these particular forms here, you start taking a look at a little more deeply, taking a look at now larger school context, right? So the question then is, how do you connect with parents, right? That's a little bit moving further out there, right? How do you use the information about your school resources, right? Your school and maybe your school and district resources, right? And then your site orientation checklist. So we're taking it out a little bit more now to take a look at the broader perspective. So looking at this a little more closely, you'll see that you've got the school and district resources. These are things that are important for you to know about, right? Taking a look here specifically, I know a lot of your classrooms are looking at a school-wide discipline plan. Many of you are using PBIS. Some of you use character education. These are important things for you to note as you do this. The other very important thing is that communication. So how do you use, in this case, a question is your back to school night to convey your expectations, right? And how do you basically apply some sort of a system where you're communicating the student achievement in your classroom, regularly. Maybe use computers to do that. We had the parent panel recently, and the parents said, it is really important to communicate using technology. They also felt it was important to maintain the use of hard copy documents for a lot of the families. So as a teacher, what are you doing to be sure that parents are part of this process, right? Beyond that, you really want to take a look at this section down here, which is all about now being able to contact them on a regular basis in a very ongoing way, not using a phone system to call all your parents to let them know there's a quiz or an upcoming event of some kind, but to connect individually and personally. Again, it goes back to that class profile. You have some students who have more needs, then you should be contacting with parents more. Those parents more, right? And so it's how are you starting to do this? And it's a difficult thing, but again, having that support provider, ask them, what are some ways I can do this, authentic and genuine ways I can connect with these parents. It's a very valuable thing. The next here is really taking a look at these resource pages so that you know who to go to for different things. I'll tell you, we have some curriculum specialists here at the district office who are amazing individuals who really know their content. They know Common Core. They've delved into different ways to practice it. Been a lot involved in unit development and lesson plans and integrating technology and text complexity across the discipline areas. So those names should definitely be on here because they're very important. Special education professionals here, just amazing folks. And so take the opportunity to really know this. The other piece is, your support provider probably knows this information and where to access this information pretty quickly. Also, if you've had teachers who've been in BITSA in the past, they know this information. So definitely work together with those resources to make this a much more manageable thing. My experience in a school setting was I had some administrators who had a binder, a staff resource binder, and so a lot of this information was in there, and that was a really great thing. So take advantage of all that and make this a little easier for you. We move on to the community, right? So we talked about a minute ago your class, your school, the district, and now the focus here is much more on the community piece, right? So what we're going to do is take a look at our greater community. What is around your school? Again, we want you to integrate technology here, and you'll see that this particular individual did a little Google Map shot and did a great job at showing and highlighting some things in the area that were valuable. We look at things like, of course, libraries and the zoo and museums, and those things is really important. But let's think from a parent and student perspective. What are some of the needs they may have? So you may be looking at some tutoring services in the area, some health clinics in the area. There's a wonderful free computer resource in the city of Santa Ana. Just think about the perspective of a parent and what they might need and come to you for. I think would be a great opportunity for you to visit the local library and see. They usually have handouts of things that are available. Your school also has probably English language learning classes and computer classes and those kinds of things. So look outside of into the community to see what's offered, and then talk about that. This whole section is making a connection between the map that you created and the value of that map and how you would use it as a professional or how you have used it. So we're essentially taking a look already at all that collecting and reviewing information, and now we're going to look at making sense of it, right? And contextualizing that information and contextualizing it and extending everything that you've gathered. And so that's what we're going to look at right now. We're going to look more closely at steps 2 and 3. So when you get into this contextualizing, you're going to start with that first piece of business we mentioned, which is the class, school, district, and community profile you created. You looked at a lot of information. So now what this document does is it offers a section down here which has quite a few questions. Now, you don't have to answer those in written form. These are simply guides for you and your support provider. Okay? Support providers, these are guides for you. These are conversation prompts, right? But as a support provider, you have lots of information and knowledge, and certainly you can move beyond these, right, if you see something that's more specific to the teacher you work with. So this is an opportunity to take that information from that class, school, district, community profile and really make sense of it, right? The other piece you'll be looking at, making sense of, are these other pieces, right? And these other pieces, coincidentally, align with a very important piece of information, which are the induction standards. Okay? And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But there are 4 induction standards. My apologies, I kind of get a little crazy with all these little tools and how to use them. But there are 4 induction standards, and we're going to talk about those 4 induction standards in the next page. So the standards are here, essentially pretty simple to see. You've got pedagogy, equity, special pops, and English learners. Remember when you did the contextualizing, those are questions that you guys are going to have dialogue about, right? You're going to dialogue about these things, and that's the contextualizing piece, right? So when I start to have a conversation about, how does all this information that I collect actually impact the pedagogy and the choices I make, right? How does it relate to equity? How does it relate to special populations and English learners? Now, it's not a mistake that you did an English learner report and a special population report, right? How does that impact all these four standards that are your induction standards? So let's take a look at one of them a little more closely. This one here is contextualizing related to pedagogy. Again, really important. You're only discussing this. You're discussing this to be able to hopefully really get to a point where you understand the collection of information much more deeply, right? And then what you're going to do after is you're going to reflect and apply. So you've had the conversation about pedagogy using some of the prompts that are available, and there's quite a few, right? Using those conversation starters. You're going to think about those. Then you're going to reflect on those. But you're not going to do anything with this page. Does not even need to be submitted. Because where you're going to include that information is in your induction journal. Okay, it says it pretty clearly here, and it says it again here in the directions. You're going to take these conversations later on, and you're going to use them to guide your response in the induction journal. And that's where those 4 induction standards are clearly articulated. So let's take a look. Again, remembering the induction standards are pedagogy, equity, ELs, and special populations. Those are the 4 documents you are having conversations about. Support providers, your conversations are so important because they're really going to lead them to understand these induction standards at a much more valuable level. Because now they go to the induction journal, right? And the induction journal, clearly enough, pedagogy, equity, ELs, special pops. So you see how you've had those conversations. Now we're going to add another layer, and there's going to be where they write, where your new teachers, where you're writing about the thoughts that you had and the thoughts that were developed, right? One of the cool things that you'll notice, or at least we think it's pretty cool, is this time we've provided you with some thinking and some prompts for thinking. And so they are right here. And so you're going to respond to those. And they're pretty valuable prompts because they talk about, using these pieces of information, right? The first one talks specifically about, okay, you're a teacher in the classroom now. How have you seen your classroom practice grow from where you were before in your student teaching experience to now? How has it really blossomed, right? Another piece down here specifically talks about the use of technology. And a really cool thing we added this year is some hyperlinks, so that, for example, here we have the student technology use agreement and the staff employee use agreement, so you can click on those and read them, and that'll help you understand also some of the things you need to know as a professional. So these prompts are pretty important. One of the things I would say about these prompts is that they're very valuable because they allow you to be able to speak very clearly in relation to the standard. Because this is the standard. This is what you're going to write about. Okay? And you want those to be very closely related. We chunked the standard into in this case, into 4 pieces, right? So that it would be easier chunks to manage. And then your job is to show, okay, this is what the standard says. Right here it says I should be doing this. Here's some pieces to show how I'm doing that. Now, down the line, this is a heads up, down the line, we're going to want you to provide evidence that goes along with it, okay? So, for example, in this particular case, the standard says this, you say you're doing this. If we say to you, that sounds really exciting, I'd like to see that. And so that's when you could pull out maybe a piece of, maybe a lesson plan that you created, or a piece of student work, or a picture that demonstrates that. Now, we don't anticipate right now that you'll be able to pull out those evidence pieces, but we want you to know that by the end of the year, you should be able to have one good piece of information for each of these pieces. Okay? So that's what you're working toward. Try to keep it as, really not what you think you're going to do about the standard or what you plan to do, but what you're actively doing. Okay? That's pretty important. Other thing to just show, and just to reiterate, because it's always good to have that on your radar, this is always done at the end of every module. So at the end of Module A, you're going to complete the journal. At the end of Module B, you'll complete this journal again. And at the end of Module C, you'll complete this journal again. So you'll have 3 opportunities to do that. And remember that at least one of those journal entries should result in some piece of evidence of some kind. Okay? And this is just going over again those really clear chunks that you have, and those different points for Module A, B, and C, those due dates. All right? And I'll say that for Module A, we've included these prompts here. Okay? We're on the fence as to whether or not we're going to do that for Modules B and C. We may let that be just a free write for you and your support provider to talk about, and then later on let you decide, what it is that you're doing that's evidence-based. Okay? So now, sorry for this random little piece here. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but those were the induction standards, and those standards are very clearly related to your Clear Credential program. But it would be really silly of us not to integrate the standards for the teaching profession, because these are the standards that you will use for the rest of your teaching career. Those induction standards are very broad, and they use lots and lots of information. But it would be silly of us to think that those induction standards have no relationship with the standards of the teaching profession, right? Because the induction standards prepare you in a much broader sense to very clearly be able to attack the standards for the teaching profession. So these are your future visionary standards, right? And you always want to think about how you are modeling these standards, okay? So the CSTP are very, very clearly broken down. Okay, so you're going to see, yes, this is Standard 1, but it has elements. In this case, Standard 1, I think, has 5, 6 elements, right? So there are fine nuances within the standard that you really need to look at, okay? So look at them really clearly, and again, by the end of the year, the anticipation is that you will have evidence for each standard. So Standard 1, you should have a clear piece of evidence to show how you're demonstrating Standard 1. At least one element of that. Standard 2, at least one element you should have evidence pieces for, okay? So for now, though, all you need to do is think about, where am I on this standard? How is my current level of practice? How am I demonstrating that I am able to actually practice these standards? And that's so critical and important. And one of the reasons is because this is your formal evaluation. Your administrator evaluates you on the standards for the teaching profession, right? So it's so important that you develop in those areas. What I wanted to point out, what you'll see on the left, is the booklet that you've been given. It is available electronically on www.bitsa.ca.gov. So you can access this book anytime you have an electronic device, and you can look it over. And some people like doing that, and that's perfectly fine. But we gave you a hard copy, and the reason is we'd like you to think about using it in the following manner. When you open up, you see each and every standard very clearly. This is Standard 1. Standard 1 has the elements that we talked about, right? Beneath those elements, you're going to see questions that relate to that element. So it says, hey, you know what, if you're doing 1.1, how are you doing the following bulleted items? So if you can look at 1.1, all of a sudden this one standard and this one element becomes much deeper. So what I would highly recommend you individually as a participating teacher and as a support provider is to consider taking this particular document and looking at it one element at a time and asking yourself, which of these bullets do I feel really good about? I feel like I'm proficient at this particular bullet, the second one, and maybe this one. Then go down and do the same for another. Maybe just one bullet in that case. Maybe here there are three that you feel good about. That gives you a good starting point, because if you are highlighting 2 out of 8 bullets here, then what that means for you is that when you come to this area, if you've only highlighted 2 out of 8 for this element, then chances are you pretty much are going to be within those first 2 categories in terms of your proficiency. So you see, it gives you a really good starting point to understand the depth of these standards in a clearer way. One thing I want to mention also about this is that at no given time do we expect to see this type of entry where you are proficient all the way the same down the board. To us, that speaks to somebody who really isn't taking this very seriously. So you really need to take a look at the distinguishing factors between these elements and how you are practicing them. The other thing, just like the induction journal, this is submitted at the end of each module. So Module A, Module B, and Module C. And you'll notice each time the support provider should initial it at the end of each. That shows that they helped you work through this and you had conversations about your level of proficiency related to the standards. Okay? The last thing we have here is your checklist. Now you're done with your module, you've done all those pieces, you've done steps 1, 2, and 3, and we have this as a following, the last step, which is the induction journal and the CSDP rating, right? You've done all these things. So now you hand all this into your support provider. It is then your support provider's responsibility to look it over. And they need time to do that. They can't do this overnight, just like it took you a few months to do this. They need time to really take a critical look at that. And they can make comments over here, and they can then sign and date that they've looked at it. They then return it to you. They might have suggestions for revising a few things, right? And then you may revise those few things and submit them to us. We do not accept any module without a support provider signature, so that's something really important for you to recognize. It comes to us, and a module reviewer will look it over again and give feedback, and they will indicate whether it's complete or not here. Okay? If things need to be revised, it will be returned to you. The entire document is not returned to you. That stays with us. We give you the feedback along with the pieces that need to be revised. Okay? I cannot stress enough the importance of you keeping a copy of the work that you do, and I'm talking to the participating teachers. Sometimes support providers actually keep copies of participating teacher work as well, but it is critical that you have a copy of your own. We cannot hand modules back and forth in their entirety. We retain the parts that are complete, and we give you the parts that need revision along with a sheet explaining what those revisions are. If you need any help or clarification, certainly give us a call or come by the office, set up a time to come in to make sure we're here, of course. But that's really important. December 3rd is the due date for this particular Module A. What we have here as far as 11/20, you really need to look at December 3rd, because we normally would like you to return or turn your things into your support provider the week prior. However, in this case, that falls during the Thanksgiving week, and we have that week off. So really what you're looking at is no later than November 20th, you should submit this to your support provider so they can review it. The hope would be that they would be able to look at it and have it back to you when they come back from Thanksgiving break, and that'll give you a couple of days to do any fine-tuning, and it will be due to us Wednesday, December 3rd. Okay? So we really hope that we've given you some good information, that you feel much more ready and to move forward in this. We're here to help. That's all we want to do, is to help you show the good work you're doing in the classroom, and also to recognize some of the challenges you have in your classrooms, and to have honest conversation, and to have opportunities for us to come and help you with the struggles you're having. If you're struggling with classroom management still now, don't hesitate to get help. That's what we're here to do. Thank you so much for everything, and we really wish you just all the best in getting this information and making the best of this information and taking this opportunity to grow as a professional. Thanks so much.